There he is. Hi, Derek.
Hello.
Hey, hello.
I was in a different
How's it
room
going,
by
Derek?
accident.
Oh, well, welcome to the room.
Thank you.
So I'm going to record it today. So should I start it yet?
Sure. DJ doesn't want to be the secretary for sure. I'll do either the executive or the initiator, whatever somebody else doesn't want to do. I don't mind.
I'll be the initiator, I guess.
Okay, rad. I'll make it right.
Okay. So I'm gonna go ahead and record it.
Perfect.
Hey, Derek, it doesn't allow me to record it, so I got the proof by you.
Oh, it does not allow you to record it?
Yes.
It says it's recording.
I need a permission.
Yeah, it says it's recording.
Yeah, I think you're good. It says it's recording.
Okay. Okay. So
All
you're
right.
gonna send it to Dr. K, right?
You'll send it if you're the one recording it.
It says record. I don't know. I just send me a message. I said I cannot record it.
Let's see. It says recording, so I think we're okay. Like,
Okay.
Yeah, I think we're good to
all
go.
right. Yeah. So DJ, you want to be the initiator or whatever that one is? I think you were the executive last time. I don't remember.
Oh no, I was the executive last time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was the initiator the last deal.
Oh, okay. Do you want to be the executive then, and I'll be the initiator?
Sure, that'll work.
Guess I should see what I'm supposed to do.
I'm refreshing. I wrote I wrote over.
So who's the secretary?
Not DJ, and I did it last time.
The person that's probably recording it probably should do it because then they can
Okay.
do it both.
Oh, that. Are you cool with that?
Okay.
Okay. Okay.
All right, let's roll it. Anyone want to strike it off?
Sure, I was gonna do one because it was easy. So the sport I wanted to talk about was triathlon. So the question is, using a sport of your choosing, describe the effects of training on both endurance and resistance training performance.
Okay.
So for triathlon training, it's swim, bike, run when you compete, which makes the rules of specificity kind of interesting because you have to train for all three of those things, including a weightlifting regimen that touches all of those like primary muscle groups. So for cycling, I think it's really important to build your glutes, your hamstrings, and your quads in a capacity that allows you to have good body to weight or body weight to power ratio. So that's usually heavier lifting, but you also don't want to have a lot of heavy muscle on you when you're a runner. So that makes that a little bit complicated. And as a runner, it's really important to keep your joints healthy and functional. And then as a swimmer, of course, your core, your upper body is really essential to work on in resistance training to kind of help support those. So endurance is easy just because all of those sports are long distance. There's some sprint triathlons, but typically I would talk about a triathlon from the Olympic distance up to an Ironman distance.
Okay.
So training for both endurance and that resistance power at the same time, I think the triathletes end up being some of the most well-rounded athletes, especially like physique build that you can find. Their upper body is usually well defined. It's also muscular, where a lot of runners that doesn't happen, a lot of cyclists that doesn't happen, and then vice versa. Like their legs are usually in great shape, their core is in good shape. Where that's not necessarily true in swimmers. And overall, all of those sports promote each other's endurance and aerobic capacities, but they don't really touch into anaerobic very often, which is a place you could go with their resistance training to be more interesting and support some of their cycling needs. So those are my thoughts, at least on triathlon, and how those guys kind of intersect with each other.
You find like most athletes in those sports tend to come from like one of them, and then they pick up the others, or they.
Shockingly, no. Like, you would totally expect that somebody came in from one of those sports, but a lot of them come from completely different sports, like wrestling, or I've had football players or things like that. Really commonly, swimmers do end up in triathlon, and that's partially because there aren't competitions after college level, really, that are as easily accessible. Like running, you can run through college and you can run a 5K any weekend, for practically most of America. Cycling also has a lot of prevalent communities. Swimming, is a very specific community because it has, you have to have a swimming pool. You have to have time in a swimming pool to do the laps. And so the competitions are a lot less scarce. So a lot of swimmers end up as triathletes because they get to dabble in other sports and find pool time. So they already have a leg up, because usually teaching people to swim at a later time in their life is the hardest part.
And so I guess you kind of touched on the anaerobic adaptations as far as from the strength training perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Where have you seen the best crossover from weight room to particular portion of the triathlon? So would it be like, hey, look, we had a lower chain focus and saw cycling times decrease or swim times decrease, something like that?
Higher weight load in resistance training for cycling focused movements, I've really seen the biggest change in. Lifting, I think, is really important for swimmers, especially because they are operating in an environment that's at a higher density, so they have to, it lifts your body up, but you're pushing against the resistance to make that happen. Running, you're just carrying your own body weight typically, but cycling, you're not only pushing against your body weight, you're usually pushing against the gearing as well, and your upper body can't be involved highly. So I think that's the biggest crossovers in cycling.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
You find that lifting is a common addition? Like, I remember the distance runners from from where I went, and they don't really lift. They're kind of they're encouraged to,
Mm-hmm.
but at the end of the day, I would say they probably did it 5 times over the course of the whole fall, winter, spring.
Yeah, I would say that runners probably lift the least. Cyclists lift, but it's maybe once a week, and then swimmers are usually pretty disciplined lifters. Will lift 3 times a week or more for their sport. So it kind of depends on where they come into the sport. If you got somebody who came from wrestling, they also lift a ton. Coming into the sport, they have better habits, and they kind of continue those because they like to lift and they know that it can be protective and it can also be a power advantage. But if they come from swimming or come from running and they come from cycling, sometimes they don't have that habit, and you have to kind of convince them that this is useful.
Just kind of.
Yes, long distance runners and marathoners, trying to get them to do their first squat is just painful. For sure.
Yeah, I saw some cross country runners. They don't lift that heavier sometimes. They only come to the weight room, just be there for 30 minutes, just do some basic lifting. They walk off.
Yeah, they just do, and especially lightweights, because they definitely think that the traditional notion of if I lift heavy, then I'm going to get bulky, and they don't realize that that's not going to happen when they're still running 50 to 100 miles a week. They don't eat the food to get bulky, and they are still maybe only lifting twice a week. You're never going to be a bulky person. but there's that like initial fear because people just misunderstand, and so they're terrified of gaining 10 extra pounds of muscle and having to carry that for a couple hours.
Right. Awesome. That's awesome. That's a fun topic. That's a fun one. Anyone else want to strike it up? The next topic.
I got just relate to a holistic topic. So I found the concurrent strength and endurance training. They have inhibitory effect on development of both strength and endurance. Some studies say yes, some studies say no. They still debate on that. So I found a study said if you add the strength training to the endurance training to enhance the short-term and high-intensity endurance, like good for the 400-meter runners. But so here's the link. I'm gonna share the links. I guess how to share the links. I'm gonna find out.
You can click share screen
or the chat button, and you can put them in there.
Yep.
So the research says that the weightlifting and resistance training can have opposite effects or detrimental effects.
Do you guys see that my screen?
We got it.
Okay.
Yeah, some said, and another study says if you have the strength training right after the endurance training, so it shows improvement in the aerobic capacity.
High intensity endurance.
Yeah, typically, you hear that adding resistance work for an endurance athlete tends to help them, but if you add endurance work to a power or power strength athlete, it tends to hurt the gains that they'll benefit from.
Yeah, I think that's probably an accurate statement, and I think it has to do with you're an aerobic athlete, you don't necessarily lift in an anaerobic style, right? Like if you're an aerobic athlete, you tend to do lunges and squats, and you're still able to use the same processes to breathe and to create ATP. But vice versa, if you have some powerlifters that are really used to operating in an anaerobic state, they're used to building ATP in that way, and mitochondria or whatever are not as developed. So when they move into trying to run a 5K, it's such different systems that they're probably not as good. If you had a powerlifter trying to do a 50-meter sprint, it might be really hard for them, but it's a similar system.
Right.
Trying to have them run a 5K, they haven't developed that system whatsoever. So maybe if you had endurance runners trying to do clean and jerks or explosive movements, you might see that same problem. I don't know. That's my thought.
Well, in practice, most of the time, from a conditioning standpoint and making sure the systems are functioning properly, more so for recovery for your power sport athletes, there will be some type of aerobic base, but you want to make it efficient towards sport. So if I have a sprint athlete, I'm not going to run them marathon distances, and kind of like you spoke on or touched on, with a marathon athlete, you could run them sprint repeats and it would benefit them, but vice versa, not so much, mainly due to the primary system of performance.
Yeah, and those marathon athletes will still never sprint at the capacity that the sprint-specific athletes are. So, sure, they can do it, but, saying your sprint athletes could run a marathon, there might be a lot of walking involved. But there's just not that advantage to their distance training, but there is an advantage going backwards where you can pump up their speed and those kind of systems so that they can carry it out longer.
And also, if you think about the sport, if you're a distance, a marathon person or a cyclist, the duration of your competition or your activity is a lot longer. So when you develop the anaerobic systems, power, that kind of thing, have you have a longer span to use that kind of additional ability. Whereas if you're running 100 meters, like there isn't the time span to utilize the ATP systems, the oxidative and the electron system. So I think when you have a longer horizon, you can kind of build in more aspects into what you're doing.
Yeah, I think that totally makes sense. And there's a cycling sport that is called criterium racing. Or even you could like track racing if you've ever seen that. They're in a velodrome just going around. Criteriums are slightly longer. They're like around a block usually, but it's still really short, really tight. And those races are sort of like chess games. And if you're in the first 5 people, like the way that race is far different than if you're in the back 5 people. If you're in the back, you're getting yo-yoed all the time because they'll speed up in the front and that reverberates backwards. So like you might be cycling for an hour, in an endurance type event, but every time you come around the corner, like they're throwing out like 1,400 watts in a corner, just sprinting, their butt off. So it's very anaerobic, and then they're like recovering as they come around. So like, but like you said, they have time to do that versus, a 100-meter dash. You don't have time to slow and use that. Like
With 0 to go.
Right. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Derek, if you don't have anything pulling off of that, I found an article, I'll call it an article loosely, but a website that touches on training for football. Let me bring that up. Just talk. Well, let me see if I can exit full screen. There we go. Share screen. Boom. And this one. So I did what most coaches do without a background in strength and conditioning. They'll type in conditioning for football or coaching at your sport. So first deal that popped up was 5 conditioning gut busters for your team. Sounds challenging to me. That's a definite red flag, but a lot of coaches hear that that's hard, so they're going to do it. The Indian Run, Terrible Twins. There's one that I really want to. This deal here, Michigan State. So for training for sport specificity, football plays more so, their duration is short and your rest interval is longer. So you're almost like a 1 to 3. If you have a 7-second play, you'll have 20 to 30 plus seconds between plays, and then you throw in TV timeouts and it's more. So training a football athlete in the sense of just going through this deal, the Michigan State, you have 2 coaches 40 yards apart, and on the whistle, the athletes complete a sprint directly into a push-up at the 40-yard mark, and that's repeated. And the movement, so we have the push-up for the first one, the second one you see here, mountain climbers, then heel touches, jumping jacks, push-up. You're going to burn them out on the system, to say the least. This
Especially if you're thinking it could be 90 degrees out, 100 degrees out.
Oh, that's the more that's the.
I use this type of conditioning to get the players in shape for the season and for disciplinary reasons. I love that. Good. We should punish our players. That's how they really want to stay engaged.
100%. And some of these actually suggest similar modalities for in-season conditioning. So on top of practice volume, you have, similar training modalities as far as conditioning goes. But from this, I was brought to a reminder recently at one of our more prevalent universities, a strength and conditioning coach. He did something similar to this loosely in the weight room, and a number of athletes ended up with rhabdo.
Ooh.
Oh yeah.
Was it really hot? Is that why? They just weren't hydrated?
No, more so due to volume. The intensity and the volume was really high,
Wow.
and to make it worse, it was an arm day. So I've been told. So a lot of push-ups, curls, push-ups, pull-ups, and whatnot that contributed. So the importance of exercise or sport specificity comes into play here a great bit as far as conditioning your athletes appropriately and from one period to the next. I think it was in Coach K's module as far as his periodization blocks and how he has the how the out of season, in season, and postseason look different in volume and intensity, but you're still conditioning the correct system per sport. This article, along with, I call it an article loosely, but this webpage, it really kind of brought back that, hey, here's the why behind the energy system, or the importance of knowing the energy systems and how they, how they interact together as far as when we're training our sprints and not sprints, but our aerobic, anaerobic, and how they entail sport, if you will.
Yeah, like you mentioned, a specific, it's specific for the some position like wide receiver or safety.
Well, yes, in general, but this deal did not get into that. It did not even. I'm trying to see how I can get out of the screen share. How to do it. It did not even touch
aerobic.
Stop share. Yeah, no, it didn't even touch on that. In general, you would condition the various positions differently. So your linemen would run shorter sprints, your receivers would run, and DBs would run your longer sprints, and your linebackers, running backs would run intermediate distances. Rest time would be about the same, though.
So do most of the different, do they practice differently or separately, or do they do stuff together? Because it seems like you guys have 10 coaches, so or at least the colleges do. So
Yeah.
How much is done together where it's one approach to fit everyone versus actually utilizing all the different coaches to actually work to different spots are?
Your bigger programs and your more competitive programs, you'll have a coach per position as far as actual sport coaches. And majority of practice is broken up to position specific and then group specific, and then you come together for team specific drills. When it comes to strength and conditioning, you will have different movements or same movement, different modality per position, and your intensities may vary depending on time time of year and your workload. So, for instance, I know a couple universities, I'll say a couple just off the top, that they work more pulls with their linemen when they have a high volume of practice reps, because majority of they're working more horizontal presses in actual sport. So when they come in the weight room, they work horizontal pulls to balance out and avoid overuse issues at the elbow joint more so. and shoulder. So you do have that with some more competent coaches, so to speak.
So I've heard that Dabo after games will have them lift. Are you a proponent of that, or do you think that's gonna build in overreaching or potential for injury?
You gotta know your guys. I'm not necessarily a fan of it. So from the mental, I like some sort of a mental deload post game to kind of deal with the stress of participation and sport competition. But it works in some systems. It definitely, I wouldn't suggest it for all.
I mean, obviously, it seems to have not hurt them yet, but I mean,
yeah. Well, I don't know. If you look at their injuries,
are they a high injury rate?
Most were preventable that they ran into. Say it like that.
Okay.
I think it's interesting that you say like it reminds you of the importance of like understanding these factors and how they relate, but I think it also just points to like the importance of the program you guys are in is like getting your master's as a sport coach, like not, looking up a workout regimen that you don't quite understand that people are going to put their players through that really does impact like their capacity to play and like
right.
And I think it'd be interesting to compare sports like you have like football and like soccer, where usually the coaches have the use of the fields for as long as they want to keep the out there. Like I know with hockey in this area, there's so many teams back to back on the same ice.
Hockey time is so expensive.
90-minute ice session. So even if you want to be a a-hole coach, you have to get off the ice. So you're gonna kind of do that MSU type workout with your guys. You can't do it on the ice. You have to do it somewhere else. So I mean, it's kind of interesting to compare because I'm thinking like wrestlers and like dancers, they go hours. Like they can go like half the day. Whereas like just for certain sports, you just don't hear about that.
I was just gonna say ice time is really, really expensive. So that's just, and runners are just on a trail. There's no end time until the sun goes down, and then you can put a headlamp on them if you need to. Like, you're right. It's
running shoes, and then you
right. You're fine. Yeah, hockey almost limits the amount of training that you can even do that's sports specific. Like, you have to almost do a lot of stuff off ice to get your stick handling better, to create, power and things like that in the weight room. I've never really thought that all the way through, I guess, to where like that ice time, crunch time leads in training.
So we'd be curious to compare like the injury rates for like the NBA and the NFL and the NHL. I mean, granted, NHL teams own their own hockey ranks and stuff, so it's a little bit different. But
no, you can
interesting to compare.
You could do it based off of GPS data, and they track every second on the court, especially in practice and competition. Some regulations and rules kind of make it hard to do, but there's still ways around them or within them. It's doable.
Yeah, I think if you looked at like college athletes, because all the way up until college and even in some colleges, like they may have their own ice rink and they may have their own, basketball court and things like that, but there's still so many other users of the court that it's not privatized. So like if you're going to see injury rates, you'll see it from them playing all their life to be a college athlete, and then like once they make it off to professional players.
Some schools have worse track than others.
True that. Our track in high school was a square. No joke, it had 4 corners.
So for ice hockey season, how many games you play in a week, Derek?
So if you're like a serious junior hockey player, you start in mid-August and you go until April. You'll play probably 80 games. You think about the like most elite like hockey players that are aspiring for college, whether D3, D1, between summer, preseason, postseason, regular season, you're probably playing 100 plus games a year,
Wow.
which I think is pretty dumb when you think about it, because college hockey, at the D1 level, you play 32 games.
Right.
And the D3 level, you play about 18. So, like, why are you having kids who are between 15 years old and 21 playing over 100 games? I
Right.
mean, the NHL is 88 games, and they're pretty tight in the off season not to do much. So, or at least hockey-wise. So, unless you're so good at 17 years old, you're going to go to the NHL the next year. It seems like they should play more like college than the NHL, but
Right.
it seems like there's more games now. There's not less games. So. Which brings in that great subject about the baseball. Was it Harper that said, or one of the Cubs guys was saying that he would take less money to play less games?
It was, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think
that was recent.
Yeah, that's recent. That was just this year when, in April, there were games where it was like just above freezing out.
Yep.
And he was like, I would rather not have the game than begin a month early.
Oh, yeah. Baseball is such a ridiculously long, like
180 games or something?
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
No one ever blows their shoulder out as a pitcher, like, duh.
Seriously. So much fun. Well, hey, Derek, have you have anything?
Well, I think like Dr. K said in an email that it's like we can kind of go on our own, like we can.
Right.
Or he just wants us to talk for half an hour.
He did.
Follow the post. So I think we've hit that, right?
We have. I have a question for you guys. Like, you don't need an answer or anything, but it's a sports psychology principle that people are talking about. And there's only a few of us who coach and are trainers in my program, so I thought I'd ask you guys what your thought was.
Sure.
Okay, I got to draw it so everybody understands.
The drawing.
The drawing is happening. Okay, let me see. Okay. So if I do this. Da-da-da-da.
You've been waiting all 2 weeks to do this.
Maybe.
You learned about this last time. You're like, I need to do a drawing.
Don't judge me.
I still don't know how to do it.
Wow, there it is, team. Okay.
Whiteboard, look at that.
Whiteboard. So we all understand periodization, right?
Yes.
Okay. So sports psychologists are kind of thinking about how to periodize their psychology training along with physical training. So we would have volume high in the early season and it would decrease over time, whatever sport we're talking about, and we would get more specific and more qualitative. And vice versa, our intensity would start low and it would creep up over the season time. So this we would assume is like our season actual like training block, that direction, right? So now we have to figure out how I erase things. There we go. Okay. So I think, and help me here, this is what I'm asking, I guess. So I'm thinking that our psychology principles need to follow this. Other people think they need to be opposite. So the way I'm thinking of it is high volume in the beginning. So I'm maybe asking someone to do an hour of training in the beginning here, and I'm using a lot of psychoeducation, so just talking and introducing concepts and getting them good at them. And then as their season progresses, I want them to do less time, but more intensity. So I want them to actually, like, when they're maybe in season and it's, finals for hockey, that instead of them having to do a high volume at that time because they have extra time because they're not training physically, that they are still focused. So maybe they're only doing 10 minutes during, playoffs, and they're doing an hour early in the season, but that their intensity, because they've mastered their skills, can be higher. So that 10 minutes is more useful. Like, I don't know.
Really, they would need more at the end of the season when there's the pressure of a national tournament maybe, or a league tournament. Like I'm thinking like
But
just like let's say for like football, like the bowl games and the semifinals and the final, like there's so much media coverage. Like I feel like if I
but you
was Nick Saban, I would want more, not less.
But in
but your
volume,
duration would be lower. Your volume really it would fluctuate in your intensity. Yep, what she's doing.
Okay.
Hmm.
so I guess my thought there is like, yeah, I know you want maybe more, but
You'll have more stressors too.
right. Like
So
I'm
like
thinking that
time becomes more of you don't have as much uh,
right.
to allocate. So like front end of the season, that's when you're given more free time, so to speak. Um, Even though your training volumes are normally high, but as you progress through, I mean, you can factor in time in the training room and travel time and a lot of other things that come into play in actual sport. And you actually have less time to allocate toward X. So, like, if you pick up your proficiency, you'll need less time to get back to your homeostatic state, and you can do it more intensely.
Right. So, like, I guess I'll present my thoughts and their thoughts really quickly. But so, in our little beginning here, you may have, 5 hour days of like practice or something where it's like physically exhaustive, but it's
Mhm.
not intense. It could be, for hockey that you're just doing drills and skills and things for 5 hours. You're conditioning for 5 hours, but it's not mentally fatiguing in that, like, you're playing very high intense games. So maybe I take 1 hour here to introduce the concept of like imagery. Like this is going to take a long time for them to get good at and control what they're trying to imagine. So the intensity for me is also low here because it's not. I'm not actually really asking them to use imagery yet. I'm describing it and telling them how it works and then practicing on just even controlling their own body in an image. Same thing here. It's not an intense practice, it's just freaking long. And then as they start to switch over, that the intensity is freaking ramped up here because you're in playoffs and you're playing as hard as you possibly can, but it doesn't mean you're playing as often of games, and you're definitely not working out as often to recover between. So I would think that like your mental fatigue here would be higher. So instead of taking an hour, maybe I take 10 minutes out of your day, and by this time you're really good at imagery, so you can actually use 10 minutes to imagine a
That's
full
awesome.
game playoff. But the opposite, someone else might say, is exactly what you were saying, Derek, is like, okay, but because I have more um, more workout time here, I don't want to spend more workout time also doing this. I want to spend less time doing this here because I have too much time wasted. And now I have all this free time because my intensity is high, but my volume's so low. Why wouldn't I want to spend more time, on mental skills?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm not saying it should be less in the beginning. I just think like as the end season comes, the ante usually is a lot higher. Every game counts a lot more, and then usually in the postseason, it means win, you go on, lose, and you go home. So I feel like even though maybe they are more fatigued, I also feel like coaches from a physical point of view, at least in hockey, they all tend to pull back a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the teams that tend to go deep tend to have better mental
Mm-hmm.
focus. So like if I had access to a great sports psychology department that's helping us, I think I would probably actually give them more time, not less. I mean, probably more time and intense time, just because we probably aren't lifting as much at that point. We're not doing as many of the additional physical things. So like spending more time on imagery and self-talk and stress management, I think
So you're talking about almost like filling that space that they've created because their volume is low with keeping them engaged by doing sports psychology. I think that makes sense.
And like you say, like you're spending the hour even in the beginning, but at the end you'll probably maybe keep the hour or even do more just because I think, I mean, obviously the physical is a huge part of it, but I think the mental is usually where teams, like I'm just like, you look at like hockey now, how did Boston beat Tampa Bay 7-2 in game 1? And then they've basically lost all the other games after that, more or less. And it's like, and I just feel like Tampa Bay, they could have just said, you know, we can't do it, and they somehow bounced back. And so, so I feel like, so I just feel like the mental probably is more important. Like I think, like the whole like controversy about Central Florida and their national title, like saying that they've won a title, like it would be interesting to play the game at that level that Alabama and all of those teams do on a year in year out basis. I think it's different than like what UCF is saying. Yeah, you may have beaten these two teams in the regular season, but it's very different when all the lights are on you and all the ESPN coverage is on you and everything. And then to pull out a win at that point, I think it's a little bit different. And I think that's where the mental sports psychology side comes in.
I think that makes sense too. So maybe it's more like a kind of high volume and it comes back up at the very end or something where it's, since they have time to dedicate to that, and it's the pressure time that could actually be like relieving and keep them engaged without taxing their physical body. Like, I think that's worth it. Like, and I also wonder if there's a difference between team sports and individual sports with that too. Like, I don't know.
And also, I think like the season, like if you're talking about basketball or hockey, like those are winter season sports. So you also have winter break that you can use for high volume.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're like football or baseball, where your season's more or less encapsulated in your academic semester, like I don't know how you kind of tackle that.
Yeah, that's true too. Because then by the time that some of your football games are getting really intense, or your finals, and I know that a lot of like players get help.
I know at some universities they hit it early and hard and camp and through camp when they're more so regulated as far as your time as football. And then it's almost like a spot treatment, if you will, throughout the rest of the season. They'll have, like my buddy, he's an SC at Oregon for Oregon football, and he has the deal that he's doing with them, basically mental skill training, or he calls it mindset training. We'll say that. We'll roll with that. And I know some other places that they do similar deals where it's not all about hype and hyping them up, but kind of regulating the emotional roller coaster, if you will, throughout the season. And some do bring in actual mental health professionals or provide that service so that you can use it. So like by the end of the season, you've been introduced to it and you've had it all season long at different volumes and intensities during the week. So that by that time you can tell, hey, look, I need a session. Where it's more intense and the duration would be situation dependent.
Yeah, I'm almost wondering if like periodizing only works until like season starts. It's so independent.
Out of the weight room almost.
Yeah.
As far as, you know, how you have that deload, so to speak, where I hate saying undulation because it's gotten kind of a bad rap or whatnot, or overuse in my opinion, but it undulates. So it's, you know, if you have a high volume of stress, you might need more, but at a higher intensity rather than a higher volume. So you regulate that stressor. But also, like, if you're like, hey, look, we're all happy and good to go, you might increase the volume but pull back on the intensity. So that would be a time to kind of introduce, you know, new concepts or whatnot. And then when the time comes to use them, you can hammer them hard with the intensity, but the volume's not so high.
I think that makes sense because that's like, I guess, two different ways to look at sports psychology. Like, is sports psychology either the relief from stress because it helps you cope with like the physical stress and the other mental stresses by getting better at it? Or are we adding to the mental stress because we're teaching you new things and it's a different dynamic? So like once you've learned it, sports psychology becomes more of a relief and less of a stressor in itself.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
From a coaching perspective, so let's say you were assigned to a team. Like if you got assigned to like basketball, you only have 10, maybe a dozen kids. So you can like probably do one-on-one sessions for your like teaching the sports psychology.
Right.
But if you're assigned football and they have what, 75, 85 kids?
Right.
Yeah.
How are you gonna tackle that? And like do you use like larger group sessions to teach these concepts, or is that less effective?
It's usually definitely in collaboration with the coaches, what they want out of it, what they see, and then you collaborate with the players too. Something as big as 85 is definitely more like presentation style, and actually kind of hate lecturing. I think it's difficult for athletes to sit still. So having them actually get up and do like some sort of almost experiential education thing. So like some goofy game that's designed to get them to like communicate in a different way or whatever. And then you sit down and you debrief really quick. Like you can do that with a giant group, but like, does that really dig into each individual's needs? Like maybe one person is really struggling with like focus, and communication is great for them to learn, but like they don't give a shit, you know, because it's just not helpful for them. So like you said, that's where like you almost need to have an opening to have individual sessions, like once there's rapport built and once people feel like there's value to it. But that running like group sessions with that big of a group is also valuable too. Like how else are you going to work on teamwork and communication if you don't have everybody there that you're trying to be a team with?
All right.
Offer if a sports psychologist only focus on your key roles like quarterback, left tackle, like your receivers, is there animosity from the other guys, like the linemen, if they don't get attention?
I wouldn't say so. I would say like I was actually gonna suggest that, you know, kind of attack it in that sense that most positions are made up of like individuals that are kind of driven or wired the same, so to speak. And so by breaking it up per, position or position group within various sports, not just football, most of the time you'll hit similar issues, which can open up for more, life-specific issues down the road.
100% for sure. And I think that also, like, breaking it up in that way is useful because that's how they also play. So, like, that makes sense. Right. But also to Derek's question, like, that depends on the players. Like, do the players see sports psychology as an advantage, or do they see sports psychology as, oh, what's wrong with that guy? He's using a sports psychologist. And, like, that's a struggle in our field. It's like, I want to be seen as an advantage because I am, but there's still a huge stigma out there that people are like, ooh, he's got, like, the players who hide going to a chiropractor, or they hide, the other extra steps they have to take to stay healthy because they don't want other players to know that they are struggling with an injury, or want to at least put that out there.
Or they just want to keep you to themselves.
Right. Just mine. Only mine. Well, thank you guys for entertaining me on my question. I'm realizing we're getting pretty close to 9, and I know it's way later for some of you guys, so I'm going to respect your time and let you guys go to bed. And thank you. Thank you guys for doing this. I'm sure
I think I'm the one recording it, so I guess I'll post it.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I cannot post. I don't know how to do it, so hosting the meeting all the time, Derek.
Yeah, so you'll post the minutes, and I'll post the recording.
Perfect.
All right, sounds good.
Sounds good. Thank you guys. Have a good night.
You too.
Have a great one.
See you in 2 weeks.
See you 2 weeks.
Yeah.